What we want to plant is 2.42 billion trees. So when is this going to happen? In 100 years? Now Cauvery Calling this year is planting 23 million trees, but I'm not happy. Not that I'm not happy, my happiness doesn't depend on anything. I'm not happy with the pace at which it is going. 23 million trees looks like big. When we showed the scale of our project and we said this is a sample project we have done, UNCCD, who is our partner in this whole affair, looks at it and says, this is not a sample, this is the largest project on the planet right now. They think it is the largest. I think it's not enough.
If this was really the largest tree planting project on Earth, then I definitely had to see it with my own eyes. So I traveled to South India in the state of Tamil Nadu and spent time with the Isha Foundation, moving around the Cauvery River basin, visiting farms, tree nurseries, and the incredible sights and sounds of South India. In total, the project in its life has distributed 84 million saplings to farmers. I'm honestly astounded by the scale of this, and actually coming and seeing these nurseries and going and seeing these farms and talking to field agents, and you start to get the numbers. As we've seen in some of these farms, some of those trees planted since this project begun have already grown up and been harvested, and then the next generation of trees has been planted. With the focus on forestry trees, it's creating an economic livelihood that is planting, harvesting, planting trees, but with a net gain of tree cover over time.
Cauvery Basin is about 83,000 square kilometers. I grew up around Cauvery. Every day, for almost 4 years, every day I swam in Cauvery River. Now Cauvery is drying up 175 kilometers inland in summers, up to 4 to 4.5 months. It's drying up. People don't understand what it means. What it means for that river to go dry, what it means to people's lives, what it means to every other life.
I grew up in the banks of river Cauvery, and every weekend we used to play cricket near the river, and the current is so strong. Nobody dares to cross the river. We have never seen the riverbed. And by the time I was in college, 2 months of the year I was able to see the riverbed. By the time I got married, I was able to see 5 to 6 months of the year. Today, 10-year-olds are walking across the river and they're playing cricket in the riverbed. So that is the kind of reduction in the flow of water in these river systems. The Cauvery runs for approximately 800 kilometers from its origin until it reaches the ocean. In this 800 kilometers, there are hundreds of tributaries which feed into the main river Cauvery. It is only because of the hundreds and thousands of tributaries and streams, only if they are kept alive and intact, the Cauvery will flow. We want to bring back green cover in the catchment areas of all these river systems, where once the rainfall comes, the rainfall is able to be absorbed by the soil through the tree root systems, and it recharges the aquifers, and the aquifers feed the river systems throughout the year. So this is a kind of a cycle which got broken. This kind of system has been maintained by our ancestors for more than 6,000 years of agriculture, and now in a span of 30 to 40 years, we have brought this down where the Cauvery is flowing only 40% of what it used to flow 100 years back. We were wrongly informed that trees are going to take up all the fertilizers from the soil, and farmers will not get the kind of commercial yield that they are supposed to get. Now what we are trying to do is what our grandfathers and forefathers had done already in the past. We are not trying to bring any new concept here. If you have enough vegetation in the land, naturally there will be better soil moisture retention, and because of that there will be rivers flowing throughout the year.
And so when we are talking about reviving the basin, this is an infrared image of that area, and what it shows is the browns indicate, of course, the areas with less vegetation, and the blues are the water, and the greens are where there is vegetation, right?
Yeah.
And clearly what you're seeing is these brown areas. Can we take that area and target it? Can we take that particular area and turn it green?
Right.
And take these subsections of this huge area and just make it a mission to turn those green, right? So that when we come back here, maybe in a few years time, this area also looks super green. This area also looks super green, right?
Right.
Is that doable? I feel optimistic, yes, it is.
ஃபங்க்ஷன் ஏதாவது ஒன்றுனா நம்ம தாம்பூலம் அந்த மாதிரி தான் கொடுப்போம். ஸ்கூல்லையுமே அப்படி தான். பட் இப்போ எதாக இருந்தாலும் சரி ஷாப்பிங் தான் பர்ச்சேஸ் பண்ணிட்டு போய் அதான் கிஃப்டாக கொடுக்குறாங்க. ஸ்கூலாக இருந்தாலும் சரி, வேறு என்ன இன்ஸ்டியூஷனாக இருந்தாலும் சரி, இல்லை ஒரு ஃபங்க்ஷன், வெட்டிங் ஃபங்க்ஷன், இல்லை ஒரு வளகாப்பு, இல்லை வீடு புண்ணியாசனா எதாக இருந்தாலும் சரி அவங்க ஷாப்பிங்ஸ் தான்.
So people come, and now a tradition has started where it is customary for when you have a wedding or a public function to buy many trees, and everybody goes home with the tree and they plant it in celebration of that wedding. So she's saying that someone will come in here and buy 1,000 to 1,500 trees for a big Indian wedding, and everybody goes home with those trees and distributes them around. So it's a really interesting strategy because we see a lot of governments around the world, and they're doing these very large-scale tree plantings, by the government, on government land. This is a very different model. This is distribution directly to the farmers and creating the system to enable farmers to be able to get good trees at a good price and raise their incomes. The economic incentive is how the Cauvery Calling project has enabled 183,000 farmers to adopt tree-based agriculture thus far, because within 5 to 7 years, they could see their incomes triple or go up much higher even. So we are here about 30 kilometers from the Cauvery River with Chinnaswamy. He's the farmer here of this 10-acre plot. In permaculture, we say that you're utilizing the edge, right? So all he's doing is utilizing the unused edges, margins, and boundaries at a spacing that it's not really negatively impacting his crop. In fact, it's actually positively impacting his crop because of the leaf litter for the soil fertility. How many different species do you have, you said, of timber trees?
Magakani, teak, African magakani, this one name.
Primarily, you grow turmeric and bananas are your cash crop. So look at how much turmeric comes off of each one of these plants, and then look how big this field is behind me. So this is kind of like it's like a savings account that is accruing interest, right? Interest in the form of the trees get bigger and bigger every year, and interest in the form of they also have a benefit to the soil.
If you want to witness in your lifetime some significant change, if you plant 2.42 billion trees in the next 6 to 8 years, in the next 15 to 20 years, you will see a significant difference in the river. We are working with 5.2 million farmers. This is not afforestation, this is tree-based agriculture. And looking at the success of Cauvery Calling, now the central government has made a detailed project report for 13 river basins. And there is a subsidy for the farmer, growth-related subsidy for the trees, which is working wonderfully well.
P.N. Murugan.
So we're here visiting P.N. Murugan and his wonderful 4-acre agroforestry farm. This farm previously was a cash crop farm. Sugarcane was his big crop. Murugan here planted 500 various timber trees throughout his property and transitioned it from solely a short-term cash crop farm to more of a mixture of both short-term cash crops as well as these long-term timber trees. With pepper vines up the trees, at this point, he's 15 years in to the planting of these timber trees. The water effect has been dramatic because now there's this overstory of shade. He's reduced his fertilizer use by 25% because the leaf litter from this overstory of timber trees is actually providing a lot of organic mulch and soil fertility. So there has been a reduction in yield, only about 70% of the previous yield. However, that is offset by a greater reduction in expenditures of inputs. At the current rate, when he harvests his trees in 10 years, he's gonna earn 50 million rupees. It's a lot of money. So there's definitely a strong incentive to replant 25 years is typically thought of as like a generation. So to think of putting these trees in and then having this massive windfall of cash once in a generation, you can see how that would really benefit the long-term outlook of the economic security of a family, not to mention the environmental effects.
Words are correct.
Okay, good. That's most important, if I'm correct. Yeah, I want to tell the truth. For you, this is hazelnuts. This is from where I live in Oregon.
Lightly salted.
That's right. Yeah, how is it? It's like eating ghee. It's like a ghee block. Is that about right? Yeah. No, it's kind of very sweet. Yes. The Isha Foundation basically has field staff like this gentleman in the different regions all throughout Tamil Nadu that are paid staff that go and work specifically with farmers to make sure that they are set up for success in their tree planting endeavors. After you do your analysis of the soil and the water, as you're advising people the types of trees to plant and the spacing to plant, if you just give everybody a bunch of seedlings, farmers, for very inexpensive, and they don't know the parameters for the most successful growth, then they might not be enthusiastic about the idea of planting trees on their farm.
Why 33%? Because they have made some studies and they've told that unless 1/3 of the land is under permanent tree cover, the normal agroclimatic conditions will not be sustained over a period of time. When I say normal agroclimatic conditions, the regular monsoons, it will fall short. The normal temperature and humidity that is needed for rest of the agriculture crops to thrive, that becomes affected. The frequency of flood and drought becomes higher and higher. So if we bring 33% of our land under green cover, the scientists have already proven that it will revive back the ecology in a very big way in terms of biodiversity, in terms of rejuvenation of the soil, and also in terms of water percolation that happens through rainfall.
What I would like to also start pointing out are all these areas that are indicating deep brown coloring. This satellite image is showing us that typically these areas tend to be showing lack of vegetation. They are denuded, right? And lack of agriculture, whereas some of these other areas are showing a good amount of green. So if I were to focus on creating forests, where would I focus on? I would be focusing on putting the agroforestry in these deep brown areas, because as you can see, they're very relevant to harvesting water and channelizing it down those rivulets down to the Cauvery River, right? So if I want to use forests as a means to not only enrich the soil, but to grab water, and as Sadhguru says, forests create rivers, not rivers create forests.
Yeah.
So where would I put the forest to create this river? So my dream would be to take this green patch and expand it so that there is no brown patch anywhere. And to me, that would be the happy space to get to revive the Cauvery River to its full potential.
In 2016 and 2017, there was a severe drought here in the state of Tamil Nadu. Now, the surrounding coconut farms, the coconut trees began to wither and the tops began to die and fall off. Yet this farm actually was able to weather the drought with very little damage to any of the trees here. They brought farmers from all the surrounding area to actually look at this farm because all of this vegetation keeping the sunlight from hitting the ground here created this really extreme shade and moisture retention conditions here. And then in 2018, just after the drought, there was a massive flood year here in Tamil Nadu. And other farms all around were flooding and eroding, but this farm, with its diversity of trees, with their deep roots, actually was able to absorb that rainwater and avoided the worst effects of the flood. So not only did they weather the drought, but they then weathered the flood. All of this because of this extreme density and multi-storied vegetation in this coconut agroforestry system. Top layer is the coconuts, then we get down to various timber trees, including mahogany and teak. Then we go down to this layer of bananas, nutmegs, and finally pepper vines, turmeric, and sweet potatoes and other species on the ground, with many different fruit trees mixed in as well. This farm that was supported and directed by the Isha Foundation has become a model for agroforestry and diversity on coconut production farms here.
It's going very well, but it's going slow. That means one generation will have to suffer seriously before we turn around. I don't think that is an intelligent way to do things. Preempting problems is the way of the human being, not recovering from problems. Unfortunately, we are going at recovery pace, not at preempting pace. We want to raise the pace. It needs support from everywhere.
There's 25 distribution points like this one that we see here, and there are 4 production nurseries within the state of Tamil Nadu. Now, a nursery like this, that is about 1.5 acres here, in a month is distributing about 40,000 saplings. What is the cost to a farmer of one of these saplings? 3 rupees. Now, these aren't just any regular saplings. These saplings were produced organically with a really high level of care, which means that there is a very high survival rate for these trees. The Isha Foundation is subsidizing these trees, so really cost is not a barrier for farmers.
If you are living on the banks of Cauvery, and it so happened, it's a drought year, and Cauvery flowed lean. There was not enough food to eat and water to drink, and you lost your children. Next year when Cauvery comes, will you worship her or no? The people were sensitive enough to see that this river makes their life. So they looked up to the river as goddess. Great sages of the south, Agastya Muni, 831 kilometers is the length of the river. Exactly at the midpoint, I'm talking about over 6,000, 7,000 years ago, he fixed the midpoint and built a midpoint temple.
So we are here at the Natrishwara temple. This temple is actually built on an island in the center of the Cauvery River. And when Sage Augustia did that, called it the navel of the Cauvery River. The Cauvery River and all the rivers here, they're not only serving the people's utilitarian needs, irrigation, drinking water, they're also serving as a powerful means of spiritual possibility. And this temple that we're at is at the very epicenter of the spiritual possibility of the Cauvery River.
These temples were built because you're talking about times which are 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. In India, we are like this. 1,000 years means we think it's recent history. So these things were built because the sages clearly understood without emotional involvement of people, nothing can be protected for long term. Only things that you're strongly emotionally connected to, you will take care of for the rest of your life, isn't it? All other things, today you may care for it, tomorrow you'll dump it. Only where you're deeply connected emotionally, that's what stays with you for life. So they invested in this, people's emotion, being strong about it. See, when you say Cauvery, it's a woman's name. There are thousands and thousands of women in India whose name is Cauvery. When I did Cauvery Calling movement, I told everybody wherever I went, this year, in this village, if you have a girl child, she must be called Cauvery. Because you need some emotion to protect something. Human beings protect whatever they're emotional about. They don't protect those things that they don't care about, isn't it? So, if you want to give it a form, yes, it's a goddess. I have no problem. I have no problem about that. But that is not the nature of my mind. But I deeply appreciate that people have built such emotion about the river, because without that, they will obliterate that. I'm just telling them, 3 days, if there's no water to drink, will water become your god? Yes or no?
Are you ready to transform deserts, create lush backyards, and feed communities? In my almost 30 years as a permaculture designer traveling the world, I've put everything I learned into Oregon State University's online permaculture design course, or PDC. The PDC and PDC Pro are the ultimate ways to begin mastering permaculture. Me and my team guide you through over 20 assignments with more than 100 hours of top quality video lectures and resources, all focused on developing your own property or project throughout the course. You'll get personalized feedback from a dedicated instructor in a small group setting. People are always asking me, how can I be part of the solution? This is your starting point. Check the link below for upcoming courses and join us in creating a better world for everyone. See you in class.